Howdy Holmes is the president and CEO of the Chelsea Milling Company and the fourth generation of Holmeses to lead the company. He began working at the company while in high school. He learned the business from the ground up during his high school and college summer breaks. He left the company in 1968, however, to pursue his dream as a race car driver, and he spent 20 years competing in motorsports, including 6 races at the Indy 500. In 1979, he was Rookie of the Year at Indianapolis, and he was also one of the first color commentators of racing for ESPN. In 1988, he retired from racing, having returned to the family business. The relationship, he says, between racing teams and manufacturing are kind of twin sisters in the sense that you're always trying to improve something with the mechanical equipment. Under his leadership, the company has greatly expanded its market and now sells to both commercial and non-commercial customers. So on behalf of the culinary historians of Ann Arbor, welcome Howdy Holmes.
Thank you very much, and thank you to those that are online. I have to share with you that I've given lots and lots of talks on a variety of subjects, but rarely do I find a mic that is my height. So this is the first. This is the first. So I wanted to share with you the history of Chelsea Milling Company and a lot about Jiffy Mix, which was invented by my grandmother, and there's a great story behind that. But a little history of Chelsea Milling before Jiffy Mix was a brand. My great-grandfather Harmon left the Dexter area and went to the big city of Chelsea in 1884. And he became one of the principal owners of what was then called the Chelsea Roller Mills. Now, for those of you who don't know, most flour mills are built by a river, and that's what creates the energy and so on. But the Chelsea Roller Mills was actually a steam-powered flour mill. So Harmon, bought out the rest of the principals in the late 1890s and renamed the place Chelsea Milling Company in 1901. And so our history really is flour milling. And before my great-grandfather at Chelsea, that my great-great-grandfather, my great-great-great-grandfather also had flour mills, one in Dexter and one in Scioto Township. So we've been in the flour milling business since 1844. But we're not known so much for being a flour milling company. We are known by our brand, Jiffy Mix. And the story behind the dawning, if you will, of prepared mix and Jiffy, the brand, goes like this. My grandmother, growing up in Chelsea, had 2 children, identical boys, Howard and Dudley Holmes. In about 1920, when the boys were just 10, 11 years old, they had a friend in the neighborhood who was being raised by a single parent. And, you know, boys will be boys. And so the twins asked their friend if he'd like to come over for lunch. And he was a little reluctant because in those days, things were significantly different than they are now in terms of, walking to school and sort of principles and values were a little bit more valued then. And so this young man said, well, I can't because my father has made me a lunch. Well, the boy said, well, come on, bring the lunch anyway. And so he came over for lunch. And my grandmother, when she had an opportunity to look in this bagged lunch, when they weren't looking, she told me that right on top was a biscuit, a white biscuit. She said it looked more like a hockey puck than a biscuit. But you have to keep in mind that in those days, when people would bake, it was literally from scratch. You have some soda, you have some flour, you have some shortening, some salt, pinch of this, cup of that, spoonful of this. And she had this thought that wouldn't it be nice if I could invent a mix that would save people time in the kitchen and be so easy even a man could do it. That usually gets a different reaction. So easy even a man could do it. Now the ladies in the room are being polite because I understand that completely. The guys kind of feel maybe a little bit uncomfortable. But hey, so easy even a man could do it. And so she started out to develop a mix. Excuse me. She did. And about 6 months before it was released, Mabel and her husband were coming back from Chicago on a business trip, and they started talking about the fact, well, wait a minute, it looks like we're going to be able to come up with the first mixed product ever. We'll have to give it a name. And so they talked back and forth, and Mabel, my grandmother, remembered when she was a young child and her father would walk home for lunch, the lady that was working in their kitchen, her name was Ula would say to Mabel as a young child, Mabel, you run and tell your father those biscuits will be ready in a jiffy. So remembering that story, that's how it happened. And so the very first mix ever was introduced in April of 1930, and the first retail customer was C.F. Smith in Detroit, which was a retail store. They don't exist anymore. So it didn't take long, as it turns out, for that small company in Minneapolis, General something. Okay, help me. General Mills, thank you. Yeah. You know, this is Sunday. You can't be swearing here in this place. Good heavens. It didn't take long for General Mills to come out with a similar product. Our product was all-purpose baking mix. As it turns out, one of the General Mills sales guys was in Detroit, and he happened to see this Jiffy all-purpose baking mix on the shelf at C.F. Smith. So he takes the train back to Minneapolis, and lo and behold, they came up with, their own baking mix. We like to call it the B word in Chelsea. That's as kind as we can get with them. And of course, General Mills is significantly larger than Chelsea Milling Company, and so they got national distribution long before we did. We were kind of, one or two sales guys that are selling it out of the trunk of their car, and so. But as it turns out, we're happy that they are, a competitor. Well, an alternative anyway. Let's put it that way. And so baking mix was our first product in 1930. It was 10 years later that we came up with our second product, which was pie crust. Okay? Now, for those of you who are business savvy or been to business school, a new product every 10 years is not exactly the way it's supposed to work. But, we're a family-run business. And from the seat of our pants, and so it was 10 years, pie crust, but oh, by the way, we're the #1 selling pie crust as well. It was another 10 years until 1950 when this guy, Jiffy Corn Muffin Mix, which, by the way, is the #1 selling dry grocery item in the United States. We make 1.5 million boxes of that product a day, plus other things. So it's a significant part of our retail offering. And I could go on and on with the years and the products and so on. But on the retail side, we've been doing it for 90 plus years. It's a mature business. It's still, growing. Yet when you have a pandemic or something like that, and people are eating at home and because the dangers of going out and so on, and people kind of rediscovered baking during those 2.5, 3 years. And I'm certain you know that. I mean, that's your interest. And the other part about baking, which people don't really, I think you understand, but most people miss, when you're baking, you're doing something for someone, okay? you're making something for somebody. And even if you're using a mix, you know, you've got to put an egg in a milk, and you've got to, you know, put it in cups, or if it's a bread, you know, different size or shape, pan, and so on. And there's an emotional attachment to food, of course. And a lot of people, you know, their first exposure, children, first exposure to baking and so on is with their mom or their dad or older sister or an older brother and so on. And those are kind of fun times, and people always remember those. And for years and years and years, I've been back at Chelsea Milling Company this is my 36th year. And oh, by the way, I should make one correction. I am no longer the president of Chelsea Milling Company. That was passed to our son in December of 1921. So I'm still the CEO and the chairman of the board. He allows me to come every day, fortunately. And it's not, you know, I'm lucky in the sense, very blessed, that I've had 2 careers which I've never considered them work whatsoever. And oh, by the way, I can't get enough of either one of them. So very fortunate in that respect. So in the early 1990s, I could see that the maturity of the home baking market was starting to slow down. People were getting interested in, you know, convenience and and it's absolutely not true that cars have always come with a cup holder. That's not true. Nor is it true that gas stations always have served food, right? So depends on what's going on as we grow up and so on. It's an entirely different kind of take on lifestyle and so on. So the 90s, the late 80s and the 90s, people were trying to see how many things that they could do with their kids. Well, my kid's in 15 different activities. Well, mine's in 17. And we were just running ourselves crazy. But when you start to look at a personal budget and you get down to the food dollar, okay, and let's just say that for a week it's $200. I'm just making this up. Well, that $200 is going to go significantly farther if you eat at home. Why? You're not going out. You don't need to get a babysitter. You're not driving. You're not, you know, no gas charge. When you get to the restaurant, you're not just paying for the food. You're paying for the labor, et cetera, et cetera. And so the truth is that the majority of people, and this is our target audience, what I call working class America, that's who we've designed Jiffy for. We believe strongly that everybody deserves a high-quality product at a very good price. We call that a value. Now, we've gone about this a little bit different than your typical business approach. And some of you may know this and you may not. We don't do any advertising. We don't do any couponing. We don't do any freestanding inserts. Nothing like the traditional, our competitors. I did get a call from Beyonce. Anybody know who Beyonce is? Okay. I got a call from Beyonce's manager and wanted to do a personal service contract, but decided we can't do it. I just made that up. Okay. I'm just teasing. So if you think about it, what happens in the real world, traditional advertising, merchandising, marketing, what happens is whether a company makes a product or a service, whatever they provide, you know, they want to get the word out, so they advertise like everybody else. Well, what happens is a good portion of those costs are put into the product or the service and passed on, you know, to the consumer. So in reality, we as consumers are paying for the price to be influenced. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's what happens. So understanding that, we decided that let's not do any of the traditional marketing. That way, we can provide our highest quality products at a price that is extremely less than the competition And in business, you're always looking for something to do that your competitors can't duplicate. So in this case, whether it's General Mills or Martha White, any of the competitors, they all do the traditional stuff, and their cost is significantly greater on a per ounce basis than Jiffy. So that's something my father was very proud of, his father is very proud of, I'm very proud of, my son's very proud of. We've been in business for 136 years. We've never had one layoff. So we're kind of, we're Midwestern folks, as you all are. We're pretty steeped in principles and values and so on. And we do things differently, and it's given us an edge. It's given us an advantage. So that's the story, really. Mabel White is the one who should be credited with starting an entire industry, okay? I'm trying to get the Henry Ford Museum to recognize what her contribution is and have an exhibition of a packaging line and so on. And so far, I haven't been too lucky, but I'm not giving up because she deserves to have it. She has been nominated and accepted in the Women's Hall of Fame in the state of Michigan, but I don't think that's enough for her. I think her contribution is, undervalued, and so it's important to me to, to try and give her the recognition that she deserves. So when we decided in early 1990 that the retail market would not be a growth feature, not in the sense of longevity. It might grow, we might be able to grow at 1%, 2%, 3% a year. But the challenge for us at Chelsea Milling Company was our entire operation was set up to be a focused manufacturer. And what that means is we just did one thing, and we did one thing very well. We made little blue and white boxes. It may say corn muffin on it, it may say pie crust, it might say buttermilk biscuit, it might say yellow cake, it might say fudge frosting, fudge brownie, etc. But they were all the same size boxes. So all the equipment, all of our facilities, all of our systems, and the mindset of our people was, narrowly focused. So to me, the challenge was, okay, well, we just can't buy some, food service equipment and install it because this is not going to work. So we had to change all of our facilities, all of our systems, and all of our people, and that was going to take a number of years. The thing that was really important to me was new equipment probably meant it would take less people to run, okay? And it was paramount to me that we weren't going to lay off people just because we were going to expand. So I looked at our demographics of our employees in 1991, and I could see in 2016 that there would be a significant number of employees retiring. And our tenure is, 20 years. Now that there's been a big changeover, it's down to 14. But nobody leaves Chelsea Milling Company, which is a good thing because we treat people the way I think people ought to be treated. And yes, it's a business, and yes, I'm an employer, or we're the employer, and they're employees. But you know what? They're people. They put their pants on the same way we do, and this idea of I'm in charge and you're not just is not something that I ascribe to. I'll tell you a little bit about our culture in a little bit. It's extremely different. But so I looked at the demographics and could see that there would be a lot of retirement. So tried to time all this changing of the facilities, changing of the systems, and oh, by the way, facilities and systems don't have, they don't take coffee breaks. They don't have bad days. And so that stuff's easy to deal with. Of course, the hardest part is the heart of any organization, and that's the people. So for many, many decades, our people, weren't used to change. And so that was really kind of challenging. On top of that, I came in from 20 years, I'm the eldest of 5. I came back in November of 1987, and at the time there were 3 other family members working there. And I was the race car driver, right? So I'd love to ask this question. Is there anyone in the audience, or maybe at home, that can see or think that there's any relationship between intellectual intelligence and race car driving? Yeah. No one has ever kind of grasped that idea yet. I do. I think there is. But I'm certainly alone. So the challenge of kind of rebuilding Chelsea Milling Company, at the time it had been, I won't say neglected, that's a little bit too strong, but there were very serious cracks under the waterline. What shocked me the most is people didn't see it. That scared me a great deal. So, I came from this world of motorsports where change is constant and emotion is not allowed, to a family business where it's all about emotion and change hadn't happened. So totally different environment. And of course, I was anxious to get started, but there were some other people that didn't think that was a real good idea. And so we went through a number of years of family conflict. Give you a little history of family businesses. For those that don't know, only 26% of first-generation family businesses make it to the second generation. Only 12 make it to the third, and it just falls off from there. I've kind of made it a passion of mine to try and help family businesses because I've been through the war. The academic folks that tell you what to do and how to deal with this stuff, they don't have a clue. But they're out there. And unless you or I have been through an experience, we really don't know what's involved. And so it was a very uncomfortable situation around Chelsea Milling Company for a number of years. It was nothing like waking up one day and picking up the Wall Street Journal, above the fold, column 1, race car driver comes home, changes course for bake mix company. The next byline was fist fights in Jiffyville. Nothing like airing the family laundry, to the entire country. So, of course, that was embarrassing and so on. But I'm going to share with you there are a couple of reasons why family businesses don't share. There are a lot of them, but there are 2 big ones. The first one is you don't ever make family decisions with your head. And you don't ever make business decisions with your heart. And if you can't tell the difference, they're both in trouble. Okay? I'll let that settle for a second. The second reason is even more significant. Families are all about keeping the peace. As a result, we don't tell the truth often. Does that make sense? You all have families, you have sibs and so on. All of us have kind of been through, bumpy times with our family and so on. The truth is, if whatever was said to you or whatever you said to someone else or done to you, whatever, if that had happened with a non-family member, you wouldn't tolerate it for 5 seconds. But within a family, and here's, if you think mom's job is really hard, like bearing the children, truth is in family businesses, everybody goes to mom. But who does she talk to? And most of the time, she doesn't have anybody to vent to. She's not going to vent to her husband about a son or daughter. She's not going to vent to a daughter about a sibling. So it's all kept inside. And you can see in that context how things just really lose their perspective. Okay? Truth is, in children, we love our children the same, but they're not the same. They don't have the same abilities. They don't have the same dreams, but it's safer to not, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. You stay away from that, right? That's another reason why family businesses just don't make it. Probably the fourth reason is it's very difficult as a parent, if there's a biological connection, to talk objectively with a family member. As parents, we want to give them guidance, we want to give them advice. It works until about 3 or 4. Then it kind of goes haywire. But you don't want your children to grow up thinking that, the context is family business. You don't want your children growing up thinking that, they're expected to join the family business. But that's what they think about. And if the discussion never takes place objectively, as in my family, I said to we have one son, he was probably 10, maybe 11, where the first conversation was, son, whatever you want to do, that's fine. We'll support you. I don't expect that that you come to the family business. And that was the first of hundreds of conversations that I had to be sure, knowing someday I'm going to have to turn over the reins. I'd prefer it to be my son, if at all possible, only if he's qualified. The worst thing you can do is turn your business over to a child who, one, isn't qualified, and two, deep down inside doesn't want to do it. You end up losing the child, and you end up losing the business. So in our case, after college, he worked there, in the summertime, like I did, doing all the schlock jobs, right? Taking paint off box cars and cleaning the inside of flour silos and whatever the grimiest jobs were. He did them. Because I told him that, look, as a family member, non-family members and employees are going to think that you're privileged. And there's only one way to kind of level the playing field, and that is that you have to prove to them that you can work just as hard as they can, and preferably even harder. That's the only way you're going to win respect. And he did. He went to Albion, and when he graduated, he said he'd like to come to work, and I said, no way. Said, you need to go do something else for a couple of years. Well, he didn't think that was a great idea, but I thought it was a grand idea, because what he didn't know, or he probably figured it out, was, look, you need to find out, what's out there on your own. Come to your own conclusions and so on. You can't just kind of walk into this, fourth generation company at the time and on Easy Street. It's not going to work. So he did, and 2.5 years later, I think he came back, and I put him in the sales department. I can't remember what title I gave him. I'd never heard of it before. It was like really something really goofy. It was, sales facilitator. That's what it was. It meant nothing, right? You could not look up sales facilitator and find it anywhere. Well, and so you can see how it went. It was not going to be an easy street. And little by little, he got more responsibility and so on. And as I said, in December of 21, he was named the president of the company. He's doing a great job. Now, we're different in many ways, but we're the same in many ways. It's a good thing we're different, because if we were the same, if we thought the same way about everything, you'd only need one of us, right? Don't need two people who are identical. So I will say that my transition from being the guy, the president and the CEO and the chairman of the board, has not been the easiest, I will tell you. And I study this stuff, and I give talks on this stuff about succession and leadership and so on. But it's been enjoyable in the sense that I realize I need to sort of take a different path and help where I can. So my challenge now with Howard and his team is I can see what's going to happen long before they do. So if it's not going to work out, I have to make the decision, well, is this going to be a big goof, or is it going to be a little goof? So if it's a little goof, we'll just let it happen, and they're going to learn from it. If it's going to be a big goof, then the question is it going to be an internal goof, or is it going to be an external goof? If it's going to be an internal goof, I'll let it happen. Usually there's a little, I've got to be careful that I don't telegraph to Howard or others the fact that my eyes are kind of gleaming a little bit. I have to be really careful not to telegraph. I know something that you don't know, and this is how it's going to turn out. But moral of the story is you have to let people make their mistakes. That's how we learn, right? That's how we learn. So back to the demographics, and we could see that 2016 there was going to be there was a gap between 6 and 16. There was going to be a significant number, about 80% of our employees were going to turn over. And so that's the time we kind of picked to start into food service. Now, a lot of people would, since we were a retail company, a lot of people, if they were going to do food service or something different, would go and find some people who were expert in that area. But not us. I spent about 8 or 9 years traveling around the country with a couple of other executives, not wearing Chelsea Milling Company swag and, in disguise, and sit in the back of these food service conventions and so on, because the language is very different. How sales take place is very different. And so the moral story is I can't be a resource to you or to anybody else if I don't understand what the challenges are. I would never let myself be in a position where somebody is asking for help and I don't understand what their problem is. How can you help somebody when you really don't know? So Jack Kennedy and I, who's retired from our company now, and another guy by the name of Bill McCready, we spent years kind of running around trying to learn what the language was in food service. As I said, the way the sales work in food service is very different than it is in retail. And so in 2007, we decided we're going to put our toe in the water, and we purchased a bagging machine. I should tell you, in food service, there are 3 common sizes for products: 6 5-pound bags or boxes, 25-pound bags, or 50-pound bags. Those are the 3 common sizes. What determines what size you want is actually the size in the back room, in the kitchen. Organizations that are using 50 pounds at a time, you can imagine the size of the mixers. And the size of the ovens are huge. But if it's a mom and pop place, a little restaurant, and like our regular kitchen, but we're selling stuff, then the 5-pound sack would be a common denominator. So we thought, All right, how are we going to get started? We looked at the segments of all the different food service, whether it's healthcare or whether it's ballparks or restaurants, whether it's white tablecloth or just in time or what. There are gazillion different segments in food service. And we found one that falls into the category of all other, and that was prisons and jails, okay? So my thought was, that's nondescript place to start. In food service, there are two sections. There are the commercial and the non-commercial. The difference is that the non-commercial are the ones that serve food but don't charge for it. The commercial side is much bigger. So the next challenge was, well, how are we going to brand our product? We're the new kids on the block. It's a startup company after a gazillion years doing the retail stuff. So came up with the brand CMC. Isn't that brilliant? Like Chelsea Milling Company, duh. But nobody knew that. And the reason we chose something other than Jiffy was because if it didn't work, there would be a negative influence on our wonderful brand Jiffy. So we couldn't risk that. Back to Howard again. That was at a time that in the summer, we bought $300,000 of this bagging machine, and it was really old, and it was a mess. It took a lot of people to hand stuff these 50-pound bag stuff, and Howard was one of them. That was great. He got all messed up. So in a matter of 5 years, we managed to capture 40% of the business in the United States of jails and prisons. So we came to the conclusion, I think rightly, that, yeah, we can do this. And so in 2016, we invested in a brand new food service building, 7 stories, where we do all the mixing, the blending, and then beneath all these mixers and so on are the packaging equipment, and off we go. We ran with the CMC brand for a number of years, and we always intended to have a second brand, and we wanted to call that Jiffy. The quality would be a little bit better. In essence, the difference is all of our food service stuff is add water only, by the way. Whereas, so in other words, if there's a yellow cake version in food service and a yellow cake in retail, they're not the same. They're not the same formulas. Because our retail stuff, it's usually add egg, water, and milk. But food service is complete. So it's been a challenging and exciting sort of project to go from a focused manufacturer and to a startup, which is pretty much, a flexible manufacturer, and to learn that there's a couple of ways of learning. The quickest way is you just tell people this is what you're going to do. But our way is we believe strongly that our people are the most important asset we have, and that why not teach them, depend on our employees to help us through this thing. It's very unusual. Most employees rightfully kind of think, well, the management, it's the us and them. Us and them is a way that works for a lot of people, but for us, we believe in total collaboration. And quite frankly, it is a strategic advantage, but you have to teach adults how to play fair, right? Our hiring process, which I mentioned a little earlier, is very different. 70% of our decision-making for new hires, whether they're hourly people or salary people, is based on personality and character. And you might be wondering, well, how do you figure that out? Well, we do a significant amount of personality testing. I mean, the common ones are Myers-Briggs and DISC and so on, and there are many others. We use as many as 6 or 7, depending on what the position is. And so why would we make that decision when everybody else hires based on someone's task experience? Well, pretty simple to me. No matter what you're selling, people do different things. Oh, by the way, they need to get along. Now, in most companies, people pretend to get along. They don't get along, and the reason they don't get along is because of their concern about their job security. Why should I tell Joe or Susie, why should I help them? They don't need me anymore. That is a serious problem in all kinds of teams. It isn't just athletic teams, but it isn't just business teams. So we've taken a route understanding that people are better if they can get along. And I tell people during the interviewing process, what I'd really like is for everybody to learn how to act like a 4-year-old. Okay? That sounds a little Harvard-ish, doesn't it? So why would you do that? Well, when you think about 4-year-olds, everybody's your friend. Everything's good, right? That's the way it is. Why? Well, you haven't learned prejudice yet. Okay? You haven't learned bias yet. You haven't been, gotten something negative happen to you. Then you start to retract. So all of that is in us, but it's long been suppressed. So you might ask, well, geez, what are your interviews like? Well, they're a little different. They start off like most other interviews. It's a game, right? You're the interviewee, interviewer. And so a candidate comes in, and if we were candidates going to be interviewed tomorrow, wouldn't we want to put our best foot forward, or right, look right, say all the right things and so on? Well, it kind of starts out that way, but it's not long before I kind of work towards finding out what people are really like. So I'll give you an example of some of the questions that I ask, and I sit in all interviews. Why? Because people are the most important thing you have. So I'm going to pick on you. So we just had a normal interview, and all of a sudden I say, well, if there were 5 frogs on a log, and 2 of them decided to jump in the water, how many frogs would be left on a log?
Let's see,
3? That's a common answer, but it's not correct. And so the answer is 5. Why the answer is 5? Because deciding and jumping are the same thing. So it's a listening question. So everybody gets it wrong. We know that they're going to get wrong. And what we do is we watch very closely, on this case, the candidate treats herself, right? It's very often that the pen starts moving a little bit. Sometimes the chair starts moving. A reddening of the neck is very good. Eye flutter is another one. Cheeks, all kinds of things happen. You telegraph who you are because you're caught in a natural situation. So we do crazy things like that. That's how we find out what people are really like. Now, to that question, we've had people argue with it. Oh no, it's 2 or it's 7 or it's and we're thinking, oh God, this is not somebody we want to work. I don't want to work with somebody like that, right? So they eliminate themselves. So this is just the beginning. So once we offer someone a position, then the real fun starts. We call the onboarding process detox, right? There's a purpose. They said we need to teach adults how to play fair, how to build relationships that are based on trust and respect, okay? How to listen to other people, we don't listen very well. You know, we are predetermined with our ideas and our influences. And when we run into or someone who we think is different, or he or she makes a statement that is in conflict with what we believe, we shut down. How about asking somebody who thinks differently than you, that's interesting. Could you tell me more about it? Even though it's, you know, you're uncomfortable with it. Be surprised what you can learn from other people when you make the effort to be non-judgmental. So, our detox onboarding process is, and we share this during our interview situations. We have a 30-minute. If they make it to the second, that's a 90-minute. If they make it to the final one, that's an all-day situation. And there's never less. The first one, there's 6 or 7 or 8 people. There's somebody from sales or somebody from operations, or HR, all these different disciplines. Why? Because we all work together. So let's start that way. And we tell them, well, there may be 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 weeks where when you start, you won't be doing your job. And people look at us, this is during the interview, and go, well, they've worked at other places, and what happens is you change job and you hit the ground running, right? Maybe somebody gives you a handbook, if you're lucky, and away you go. So, you know, having the opportunity to not do your task is all about retraining people in how to build relationships. So they're given a schedule, and we are around the clock, 5 days around the clock, and they work in sanitation, they work in wheat receiving, they work in finance, they work in sales, they sit with everybody in the office, and they observe. Now, this is not a lot of fun because people aren't used to not doing things. As human beings, what we're used to doing is we provide input. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry about you guys. At home, my bad. We provide input, and then we get feedback from others. That's how we determine what type of day we're having. Well, if we're not providing input, then we're not getting feedback. It feels really uncomfortable. That's what we want. We want people to be uncomfortable. Meanwhile, there are hundreds of us that have gone before that are cultural ambassadors, and we're just hoping for the onboarding person to come and ask us, hey, this is really uncomfortable. How did you get through it? And the more times you ask people aren't comfortable asking. People don't like to be vulnerable, but you need to be vulnerable if you're really going to be a good collaborator. And so we have a 92% retention rate with this process. Of the 8 that don't make it, 4 of them are scared to death to change, and the other 4 are just really bad actors, right? But 92% sort of make it. And what we call this is, it's about personal growth. It isn't a selfish, company thing that we train for tasks. That we do that too. What we do is we try and train people to be better people, to expand their horizons, to be more rounded. And so they become a sib, a better spouse, a better brother, better whatever. And one of the things is they're a better employee, right? When people learn to share, it's powerful, very, very powerful. So it's a strategic advantage. So that's our onboarding process. It's different, but it works. Want me to ask one more of these questions? can I ask you this? Oops, sorry. Sorry, where we are. If a hammer and nail cost $1.10, and the hammer is $1 more than the nail, what's the cost of the nail? Want to call a friend? Hammer and nail costs $1.10. Hammer is $1 more than the nail. What's the cost of the nail? That's a common answer. But wrong. Because it's a nickel. Then that would make the hammer $1 more. So $1.05 and 5 cents, $1.10. So, I mean, I've done this for a long time, and I've learned how to read people and so on, you know, and make people uncomfortable. Then they're natural, right? And what the trick is how do we treat ourselves, right? Because if we don't treat ourselves very well, we're certainly not going to treat others very well, right? So I'm not sure in terms of timing. I haven't even looked, but well, so look. Okay. It was Emily.
Well, let's give Howdy a round of applause. Okay, now I'm in business. All right.
You're
Thank
working.
you so much. All right, so if you have a question, please raise your hand and I will come around to you and hand you the mic.
There's a Emily in the guy in the blue shirt.
I'm wondering how you handled the onboarding process with COVID. What you described was a total immersion in the culture, and the rules changed when we all went online.
Well, they did. We didn't have that many people that worked from home. I mean, because we're a manufacturer, we make things. That's just not possible. There was a couple of consumer relations people did that. I mean, so everybody had masks on. We just kind of went about. It didn't really change much. And you know, that was a couple of years that was that ugly, right? And probably if wouldn't be surprised that we get caught up in it a little bit more again later on this fall. But the thing that struck me the most about COVID in our employees is our mission is to feed America, right? That's what we're all about. And so on the retail side, the business gets significantly more volume when it starts to get cold, really around August. Then kids go back to school and it starts to get colder. Then there's Thanksgiving and Christmas. So those 5-6 month period are significantly more sales than, let's say, the wintertime, or pardon me, the summertime. But so we had 11 weekends on the retail side that first year of COVID. And my biggest concern was work-life balance. After all, you know, everybody's, you know, stay at home. It's a mess. Everybody's frightened about this, that, and the other, and to some degree or another. But our folks kept themselves well. Yeah, we had cases, of course, and we were very conservative about number of days off and so on. But our folks kept coming to work well, right? Not sick, with 11 weekends of work. Normally we would have 2 or 3. And the thing that impressed me the most was that commitment to, we're feeding America. Let's make it happen. They didn't have to, right? But I think because we're a collaborative group, and what I mean by collaborative is I want people to go outside whatever discipline there are in the company and ask somebody else in a different discipline what he or she thinks about the challenge that I'm facing or the opportunity that I'm facing. Why would you want to do that? Two wonderful things happen. First of all, oftentimes a person says, well, we need to turn left at the end of the street. Well, when you're stuck in a discipline, believe it or not, it becomes automatic. And so we could say that doesn't happen, but it does happen. The other thing is, when you ask somebody what their opinion is, and you're genuine and authentic and sincere about it, who doesn't want to give their opinion, right? Who doesn't? So that's what collaborative is. I mentioned the word culture. Everybody has their own definition of culture. They talk about it a lot. If we were asked to give a definition, most of us would write the way it feels, right? But that's not a definition. Culture is made up of two things, and two things only. The process surrounding how you make decisions and the process surrounding how you communicate. Those two things determine what's acceptable. It's uncomfortable, or it's, command and control. All of those different proprietorship, all of those differences are legitimate. But what determines that environment are those two things. Thank you.
I've been in food service most of my life. Lived in Chelsea 37 years.
How nice.
I know you well. But my question was you were talking about 50-pound bags and et cetera, and plus the little Jiffy box that we buy, and that the ingredients have to be a little different in the proportion. Doesn't this change the taste of those that are, let's say, baking for a jail or something, or University of Michigan, where you're doing pans and pans?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll answer it this way. When you have a product like Jiffy corn muffin mix, okay, when we've come out with sort of derivatives, like we have a veggie and we have a honey corn, I don't know if anybody knows about honey corn, by the way, is unbelievable. Well, the challenge is, when you have the #1 selling dry grocery item in the United States, you come out with a veggie version or a honey corn, it better taste exactly like that product, or you're going to have trouble. Now, we have corn muffins on the food service side, but remember, it's different. One is just add water. Now, the same thing exists with corn products in food service as in retail. People know the taste of our corn muffins so well that whether it's on the food service side, it took us a couple of years to figure out how to get, and in the beginning it wasn't the same. But we were so new that there wasn't much damage. But our corn muffin product on the food service side tastes just like a retail, although the formulas are different, and one's just add water, the other is, milk and an egg. Well, we're very fortunate, and we don't just trust our the testing we do inside. We go to do tests at colleges, 2 or 3 in different places around the country. Because we have to be sure. If we make a mistake, it could be disastrous. Thank you.
So you said the timeline for developing new products used to be every 10 years.
Not anymore.
How many products do you have now, and how long does it take to develop something new?
On the retail side, we've got 13 products. On the food service side, between the two brands, CMC and Jiffy, we've got 60 more products. So we have over 240 different ingredients. I would say the average time to develop a product from scratch is 3.5, 4 months. Yeah. So I'm surprised that there's no questions about racing, so I will pose one for you. You probably don't know this, but I'm going to share this with you. There are 3 reasons why the best drivers are short. The first reason is there's a definite relationship between horsepower and weight, right? And the second reason is when you're small, the engineers like you a lot because you take up less space and they can put more weight towards the center of gravity, which you're sitting under center of gravity. Sorry. But the third reason is when you're short, it takes less time for the impulse to go from the brain to the foot.
I was just going to say, I lived in Indianapolis at the time you were racing. One of your first comments about intelligence and I'm sorry.
Sorry, just hold it up to your, no, you got it, just hold it up, there you go. There you go.
I'm making mistakes. I lived in Indianapolis
Yep.
while you were racing, and one of your first comments about intelligence in racing and a milling company, I totally understand because I would see those drivers working and
Yep.
how smart they had to be to do what they did. And yeah.
Well, they're not thought of as very smart, but that's okay. Every sort of profession has a sort of motif, if you will, and I will tell you that race car drivers are information junkies, and what I mean by that is, give me more things, make it more complicated, more difficult for me to figure out what to do. When in reality, you've got to identify all the options, then you've got to choose one, then you've got to implement that choice, and then you've got to measure the result. The thing is, it happens in milliseconds.
On the racetrack you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm an IndyCar fan, obviously.
Well, I'll tell you, we associated with Ganassi Racing this year, and they've got 4 cars, and one of them won the championship, another one finished second, and the third one won the Rookie of the Year. The season just ended last week. That's never been done before, and I hadn't been back to the racetrack for 35 years. I spent this past summer going to the races, and in a very different capacity. I had a ball. It was terrific.
Thank you. The original Jiffy biscuit in 1930, was it a self-rising biscuit? And if so, what was the leavening agent? Was it like a baking powder?
Ooh, that's a question I've never been asked, and I'm not sure that I can answer that accurately. I don't know. What's your first name? Randy. I don't know what that answer is. I would say yes, self-rising, but what the agent was, I would just be guessing. And I'm thinking that was a serious question from you, so I don't want to be, I don't want to be wrong about that. Well, yeah, there's a variety of things that you could use, but I'm not sure which was used at the time. Sorry.
Well, you stumped me and I stumped you.
That's fair. Fair game.
I'd like to know if you have any gluten-free products.
We do not. And the reason we don't is because you can't make them in the same facility where you make non-gluten-free. We get asked from time to time. Aside from the fact that you can't make it in the same equipment, it poses, there's another challenge, and that is that those products are very premium priced, and we're a value proposition. So I'm having a tough time figuring out if we were to do a gluten product and we had the facilities available to us, it would probably have to be under a different name, because it would not make sense to have a gluten-free muffin at $1.50 and another one at 75 cents. That would be very confusing.
I actually have a product question. One of the most famous Jiffy recipes is the Thanksgiving corn pudding that uses that.
Yes.
And I wondered, if you don't do any advertising, did your company invent and promote that recipe, or did it just happen for you?
Well, we do our own development. Now we have an entire research and development department, and we have a pilot plant. We're like the real thing. But in the early days, it was just think of like being in your own kind of.
Well, I mean, the recipe that calls for Jiffy mix and a can of corn and a bunch of other ingredients that people make on, traditional, it's really like on a list of traditional Thanksgiving foods, the Jiffy mix recipe that uses the Jiffy mix, not the mix, not only the corn muffins.
No, I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
and you if you haven't got a recipe book on the way out, make sure you grab it. That's in there. I think we developed that, but people send us recipes all the time, and we will test them, and if there's recipe books out here that I've got for folks, and we can't put all the recipes that we get. And nowadays, there are all these influencers that want us to do their sponsor their this and that and stuff like that. But a good number of the recipes in this recipe book are ones that we developed.
So in other words, that is a form of advertising that you
Well, sort of. We could call it that, but it's, yeah, our books are free and stuff. We don't charge for them, and we don't have baking contests and things like that. It's just we just do it as a courtesy, to our consumers. And hey, here's something you might try if you haven't. And so I guess you could say it's a form of advertising, but really the form of advertising that has gotten us to be on top of the heap is the best form of advertising there is, and that's word of mouth. And we all know if we recommend something to a friend, that's a significantly greater chance that he or she is going to try that than if we see it on a billboard or in some pop-up ad in your phone or whatever the case may be, those obnoxious things that keep happening.
Yeah, I just wondered about, you're talking about having a sort of collaborative decision-making culture and being values-based, and I wondered if there was any internal conflict that happened around the decision to start selling to prisons and jails specifically, or if it was unanimous.
No, there really wasn't. It was just a business decision, really. We wanted to find a segment which was not large, number one. Number two, it's kind of like off the grid, so to speak, and it's part of the non-commercial sector. It was probably the safest play we could do. And it really had nothing to do, if they happened to be casinos or something like that, it wasn't so much what they did or the fact that people were, being detained. It just was a situation where they were fed, it was safe, and we could get, we could learn something. So there wasn't much dialogue. It was an easy call. Thank you. So I think we're at the end, and I would like to say thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed myself tonight, and thank you at home. I've enjoyed my time with you, and I hope that I've brought some value somewhere along the line. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.